This is Learn It from an 80s Song. I am your coach, Patricia Freiberg. Today, we have a very special guest. Please welcome Samantha Anderson. Samantha is a strategic visionary with 30 years of experience leading organizations in philanthropy, social entrepreneurship, and innovation. She is committed to helping women lead with impact and purpose without burning out or destroying their health. Her mission is to create a better future for women and the organizations they lead by facilitating their growth and power. She is a longtime advocate for women in the workplace, helping her clients understand their unique purpose and talents and how to best express them in the world. As a board-certified functional medicine health coach and with a certification from the Functional Medicine Coaching Academy, she works with her clients to develop and implement effective strategies to improve their health using lifestyle change, nutrition, joyful movement, sleep practices, and stress management. Samantha is a mother of 3 young adult children and is a stepmother to another 3 young adult children. She lives in Brooklyn, New York with her husband, her blended family, and her dog, Beverly. Samantha, it is so great to have you here with us today. Thanks for being on the show today.
It's such a pleasure to be with you too.
Yes, and this is the part of the show where we do the big reveal as to what song we're going to be referencing today. So, without further ado, Samantha, what is the song that best resonates with the story you're going to tell us today? Can I get a drum roll, please? Yes.
It is This Is the Day by The.
Love that you picked this because we're talking deep tracks, folks, from the 80s. How fun is it to rediscover songs that we may not remember? Now, I remember The. I did not remember the song, and so I've listened to it several times, and wow, it's so powerful. And it was 1983 was when the song came out. It on the UK charts, it went up to number 71. But here's what's cool about it. They actually re-recorded the song 10 years later in 1993, and they named it That Was the Day. And that hit number 17 on the singles charts. So I love that they did that. And it sounds...
That is fascinating.
It really is. I love that. It's like you get to reinvent your song anytime you want, rename it, tweak it a decade later. It's pretty cool.
There's a lesson in that too, isn't there?
There sure is. There sure is. So Samantha, tell us your story.
So, Patricia, first off, it's so great to be here. I am really excited to get started.
Yes.
So my story starts in the 80s, I think, like most of your guests. And actually, I didn't know that song in the 1980s. Like you said, it was like in the deep recesses of the vault. And I only became aware of that song actually like 30 years later. But the 80s for me were bliss and nirvana. Like I had, an incredible childhood. I grew up, I'm in New York City now. I grew up in a suburb just across the George Washington Bridge in northern New Jersey. Kind of idyllic childhood, lots of wonderful friends and lots of outdoor activity and sports and a family life that was supportive and nurturing. Kind of in hindsight, like I was, kind of probably quite unusual because those years can be really, tumultuous. And yes. I just had a ball. The 80s for me. It was beautiful.
Amazing.
Yep.
And it
Yep.
sounds like you had such an amazing relationship, with your dad. I remember you sharing that story a little bit about how you guys worked together. Will you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. So I left the home, went off to college, and decided that I have a love of learning, and I decided to
Hmm.
pursue a graduate education in a similar field to what my father had studied. And I actually went to his alma mater. I went to the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and I studied women's labor history, and he had studied organizational development. And I kind of thought, oh, you know what, I'm going to be a professor and academic, and was along that path, along that route, and realized pretty quickly that I was very social, and being in a library all my days and nights wasn't going to suit me. So I rang my dad and I said, I think I'm going to wrap things up after I get my master's. What do you think I should do? And he said, why don't you come back to New York and come to work for me for the summer, and we'll see how it goes. My dad had a small boutique management consulting firm that specialized in employee relations and workplace culture, organizational development and
Hmm.
strategy. And I said yes to that summer. And that summer then became a 10-year partnership with my dad. And
Wow.
in what became a family business, this consulting
Yeah.
firm. I had grown up listening to him and my mom talk about work, around the kitchen table every single night. And so to have that privilege to be mentored and supported, and also given a long leash to test myself and explore in a professional setting, it was pretty extraordinary. So that was like my 90s, 80s and 90s wrapped up in a little,
A little
nice
bow.
little time.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, and I love that you guys you know it's almost like your dad. I mean, what a gift to get to work with your dad like that. And to really, like, early on, it sounds like you really knew your strengths early on about what was going to work for you, and where you shine, right? And you took
Mhm.
that into that family business.
Absolutely. The learning, and the love too. I mean, working in a family business can be incredibly stressful, and to lead with that love, always having it, as the intention. If something goes
Yes.
awry and things blow up, we all have that as our purpose and our intention. That was really a driver for me, at least. Now, looking back on it, I don't think I was definitely not aware of my strengths as we understand them today,
Yes.
but it certainly was a driver.
Yes. And then along the way, as you had that amazing 10 years with your dad and working for the business, you something thrusted you into another pivot. Tell the audience about that.
Yeah, thank you. So in early 2001, my family, I had one child at the time, and my husband and I, my first husband and I, and my newborn son were vacationing with my parents. And my dad was, he was just about to turn 60. He was a couple of months short of 60, and he had a sudden heart attack and he died while we were on holiday together.
Wow.
And um, this was one of those moments that you sort of, I mean, this is 20 years later, and I'm just unraveling the momentum of where that then led me in my life,
Hmm.
and um, just the intensity of that experience, the grief of
Yeah.
that experience, the trauma of that experience. So, our business, as such, the partnership, um, dissolved upon his passing.
Yes.
And I had to really rethink the rest of my life and
Hmm.
what I was going to do. So,
Hmm.
this idyllic, blissful, cocoon protected life that I had been very fortunate to be born into. And then as a young adult to carry forward was all of a sudden just gone in an instant.
Wow. It's like really pulled the rug out from underneath. I mean, and then you guys were on vacation together when that occurred.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, and I have a photograph of my dad in the pool with my 18-month-old son the morning
Oh,
that he died, and he was fit and healthy, and he had muscles holding my son, and optically you really wouldn't have known that there was anything going on under the surface with his health. He was definitely an overachiever and a hard worker and a light fuse, and easy to, kind of erupt
excite.
and
Yeah.
excite. Oh, I like that word a lot better.
Yes.
And yeah, so it was definitely intense.
So when that occurred, you had to then, all right, pivot. You said the business just dissolved because it really was a labor of love between the two of you and something that
Yeah.
you carried forward. But in that, it sounds like you discovered new interests and lessons learned from your dad and things that
Yes.
you might have done differently. Tell us a little bit about
Mhm.
that.
Yeah. So the business, as I described, was focused on workplace culture and strategy, and I had grown up in a family that was very involved in politics and in nonprofit work, and I had in my early 20s sat on a number of boards, and I was really
Mhm.
learning what nonprofit strategy looked like, and that was very interesting to me. And what was also very interesting to me was the blend between business and nonprofits. And towards the end of my dad's life, and ultimately the end of our business together, I had taken on a number of clients that I was working with on my own, that were striving to nonprofit clients that were striving to blend their mission and purpose with financial sustainability. And so I got really deep into that work. When my dad died, I literally did everything I possibly could to research, again, my love of learning, to
Yes.
research this world that I hadn't really known before. And it reinvented myself in
Yeah.
that process. I became a director of a program that was housed at the Yale School of Management that funded nonprofit organizations that were
Wow.
striving to generate earned income. That was a big part of
Yes.
our work, and it was like this beautiful blend of what I had learned from my dad around strategy and business and like workplace um, balance, and then my love of purpose driven, mission based work. And
Mhm.
it was a beautiful synergy. Challenging to have to do it on my own
Absolutely.
without my partner, but that was the direction I was guided towards, and what I
Right.
ended up. Yep.
Wow. And I'm thinking about like, to work with the nonprofits and then to be able to get earned income because so many people go into those nonprofits, bleeding hearts, humanitarian. And, while finances are, we have to put money on the table or we have to put food on the table, we have to have money in our pockets. But then to be able to have that financial success for those working in nonprofits is incredible.
Yeah, definitely. And, this was kind of in the 2000s, 2010, like kind of in that time frame. It was sort of novel for nonprofits to think that they could generate earned income as well as raise dollars. And I often would say, be careful what you're, when you go down this path, because it is actually sometimes more difficult to start a business than it is to ask for philanthropic, grant money. So
Yes.
kind of
Wow.
like making sure that people understood what the risks and the constraints are when you're endeavoring to try something like that.
Yes, and I'm thinking about something else you said about work-life balance, and that was that was instilled with you, also with your dad. It sounds like that was something he believed in, and that's something that you carried forward as well.
Well, it was something that he said. I'm not sure if it was something that he actually
Follow through with.
followed through with. Exactly. And it's, I don't, we can turn to that now. I mean, to be honest with you, when I was approaching my 50s and entering into the decade that we lost my dad, I definitely looked a lot at my own health. And I had, several health issues, several health challenges. I had actually divorced my first husband and had, well, before I did that, of course, I had 2 more children after my firstborn, and busy, crazy life with, this young family. And I'll just go back for a second and mention that 2001 was the year my dad passed. 2001 was also the 9/11, and my first husband was not in one of the towers, but in a building right across from, and suffered terrible PTSD from that. And we kind of didn't recover from those 2 events.
Yes.
And 3 children, under 5, and the marriage just didn't survive, really. So yet again, another catapult into a pivot and what's next for my life. So the story about my health and the challenges, it makes sense now in that context. Is like a lot of stuff was going on at the time.
Yes.
Professionally and personally, and just not holding it all, just really feeling like things were kind of getting out of control. I should add, there was a move across the pond to England for a few years as well. So without that cocoon and family support, I didn't have that while we were living abroad. So in 2011, I was like in my mid 40s at the time, and sort of the cascading health effects were starting to creep up. And I met and then married my second husband, who we have built this kind of crazy, messy house with 6 children altogether.
The Brady Bunch.
The Brady Bunch, that's right. There are 3 boys, 3 girls, making up that 6.
The youngest one in curls.
There is no Alice. That's what we often say.
Yes, exactly.
The Brady Bunch was a 70s show, but it could have been an 80s show. If they had gotten divorced, it would have been an 80s show.
Yeah. So good.
So met my husband and was very much in this, my second husband, very much in flux, coming back from our time abroad and deciding what was next for me professionally. And this is where I was introduced, or when I was introduced to This Is the Day.
2011. Yes. Wow.
So like fast forward like 30 some odd years, right? Depending on which release we're talking about.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. The 83, the original. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And it was Seize the Day, right?
It was totally Seize the Day. I met Scott, my husband, and we met in a crowded work event. And he describes it as like, I walked in the room and he was across the way, and he was like, whoosh, who is that woman? Like I kind of
Yes.
like, yes.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so yes, seize the day, and this is the day. He
Hmm.
introduced me to that song because I would go out for interviews, and he said, "Oh, you need a pump up song for that interview for the prep before you walk in
Yes.
the door." And I was
Yes.
like, "Well, I don't have one." He said, "Oh, this is it. Try this one." And yes,
That was
that's
it.
the song. Mm-hmm.
So good. So good. Now, was this around the time that you discovered the health coaching and all of that as well?
It was a couple of years later, actually. As I mentioned, I was like kind of approaching my 50s, and I had a whole bunch of weird things, at least weird to me, not so weird to a doctor, things going on in my body. And I was sent to like five different doctors to suss out what the source of the problem was. And like, the rheumatologist looked at one thing, my cardiologist looked at another thing, the endocrinologist looked at the third thing, and never the twain shall meet. And I was talking to a friend, and she said, "Well, have you ever heard of functional medicine?" And I said, "No, I've never heard of it. What is it?" And that was yet again another pivot in my life where I started to devour everything I could to understand what was the root cause of what was causing my problem or my
Hmm.
problems. We discovered ultimately that through functional medicine and through the doctor that I ultimately saw that I have a gluten sensitivity, and it was causing thyroid problems, which was causing my hair to fall out, which was causing bloatedness and brain fog and all sorts of other things that like is pretty much diet and food as medicine shifted for me a lot of things.
Wow.
And once I it was like the golden ring that you get at the
Yeah.
carousel. I
Yeah.
grabbed it and I was like, more learning. I have to go back to school, and applied to and got into the Functional Medicine Coaching Academy, which is connected to the Institute for Functional Medicine, where doctors and practitioners go to learn about functional medicine. And the Coaching Academy exists to teach coaches like myself how to support patients who are seen by functional medicine doctors. And I then pursued my board certification, and now I'm a national board certified health and wellness coach, which I'm,
Congratulations.
thank you, as are you. And it's exciting to be able to like have power from that education, like know, okay, this is what's happening.
Absolutely. You know what I'm thinking about as you are talking, and I'm reflecting on the many pivots that you've made throughout your life and how one is really, built on top of the other, and the lessons that were learned along the way, and, how unique it is to you specifically having, worked in the industries that you have, and leadership and organizations and nonprofit organizations. And like, if you look at all of that and that work with your dad, it's like you understand what it's like to be a leader, what it's like to work really hard. And now it's like, how do we then take care of our bodies to be the best machine we can possibly have to be able to achieve all of the things that we want? Now, what a unique opportunity for you to then teach people how to take care of themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, I learned a lot in the business with my dad about leadership, like you mentioned, and balance and emotional balance. Like I said too, I'm not sure if he, utilized all of that learning for himself. And but the message that I gleaned from that experience was that we can lead with purpose and power, and but we don't have to burn out in the process and destroy our health. like that are limits to that. There are boundaries around that. And there's a lyric in the song, you pull back the curtains and the sun burns into your eyes. And I think about that. The sun burning into your eyes is like that searing burnout, that like
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be that way. And this is the day to make the change that you want to make.
Absolutely. I love that because, it's interesting. Like if I look at my own life and, I've made a lot of career pivots, and I often blamed the career for my burnout, right? So I was like in community mental health. Well, it was the community mental health that was causing the burnout. And then I go into management. Well, it was the management that was causing the burnout. And so for every career, everything I've done along the way, it's becoming increasingly clear now in my 40s um that I am the problem. Like I am the one that is causing the burnout, and it's specifically, what you're talking about. It's like, how do we, there are limits, there are boundaries, and when you spend your lifetime a certain way, it is so challenging to make changes. And I'm thinking about your own life and the changes that you've made and the obstacles that you have overcome. What strengths do you think you leaned into? We're going to reference the VIA Strengths Assessment here, audience. And for those that haven't taken it, I highly recommend you take the VIA Strengths Assessment. So, what strengths do you think helped you along the way?
Right. So my top, say, 5 character strengths I've sort of referenced throughout our talk so far. So honesty
Yeah.
is number 1, love is number 2, spirituality is number 3, creativity is 4, and love of learning is 5. And I'll start with love. It's my driver, it's my motivation. It's, I describe my childhood as that kind of cocoon of blissful love, and that's what I was raised in, and that's what motivates me to recreate in my current relationships, my friendships, my children, my husband. That's the most important thing to me, embodying that love. Spirituality, I always, however many times I do the VIA character strength survey, spirituality always rises to the top. And I want to just share an interesting story that connects to the song, and this strength. So my dad passed away. I mentioned we were on vacation. We were in Florida. And about a year or so later, we returned to that same place on holiday because my parents had a place there. And as we were turning the corner on this long, dusty road to head towards the location, a car was about to turn right in front of us, and the license plate read "Carpe Diem,"
Aha.
seize the day. Mind you, like, I read it, I saw it, but I didn't really kind of digest it, like it was many, many years later that like that message really kind of seared into my eyes, like the
Yes.
song says.
Yes.
And another that's for me, that's spirit, that's spirituality. Like whether you think that, there's another godlike presence or what, but that was it for me, that spirit. And that's kind of another key driver to my life, is like looking out for those kinds of
Messages.
clues, messages. Exactly. Looking out for those messages, and being open to listen to those messages when they present themselves. Really
Absolutely.
important.
I was going to share, it was so interesting. I was in a management role, very demanding job. I was out horseback riding. A red-tailed hawk flew over me. A red-tailed hawk flew over me, and I got the message in my head that said, "Your work is done here." And what that meant to me was that I needed to go ahead and resign. And so that happened on, let's say, a Saturday. I went in on Monday and put in my resignation. I gave them, ample notice that it was that I was going to move on. And what was interesting was not very short time after that, my dad took a fall, and then that would be his last days with us. And it was 9 days. And I talk about it on other podcasts on this podcast. But what was interesting is that I heard that message. It almost like hit me across the face. It was kind of like that. But I was in the right mindset too to hear the message. I wasn't distracted. I was out. It was like moving meditation out on the horse. And then I learned later from another health coach that the red-tailed hawk is a messenger. So, and the animal, I'm blanking archetypes and that type of thing. Apparently the red-tailed hawk happens to be a messenger. And usually if they fly over, they're sending you something.
Yeah.
So interesting. Yeah. But I love that you bring that up and about the messages and just really quieting our minds enough to listen.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I'll also mention like creativity for me is really high up, and it's connected to love of learning and like always having an open mind for expansion and further knowledge and understanding. It doesn't always have to be book knowledge. Mm-hmm. It could be, just having a conversation with a friend and loving that experience of connection. Yeah. That's also part of that kind of love of learning. I see it like that. So I love the VIA character strengths. They are such a powerful tool.
Yes. Yes. And I understand in your business, and tell us a little bit about the business that you do, and then tell us how the unique way that you use the VIA strengths. I'd love our audience to hear about that.
Sure. So I have a health and wellness coaching practice, and what I have done is blend all of what I just described into my health and wellness work through leadership coaching, if you want to call it. I actually don't love the term executive coaching. Mm-hmm. I'm starting to use a term called embodied presence coaching, and really helping people lean into their authentic selves. My business on the coaching side has incorporated the VIA character strengths, and I've used my creativity strength in partnership with creativity with a dear friend and colleague named Rimi Chakraborty. And she and I have built a program called ROOTSilience. And what we've understood through the last 15, 16 months of being locked down during the pandemic, when the term resilience was being bandied about left and right, we must be resilient. We must, buffer ourselves against all the onslaughts that were coming at us. And Rimi and I were having a love of learning conversation. And I said, gosh, this word resilient just isn't enough. We need to be root-silient, to ground down and embody our presence in our leadership and embody our presence on this planet in order to withstand the stressors and the disruptions that are going to keep on coming. It's not just this one pandemic. It's just going to keep on coming. And that was the birth of this work. And what we've done with the VIA is there's 24 character strengths that you receive when you take the assessment. And Rimi is a yoga and meditation practitioner, and I've studied quite a bit of the chakra system as well, which starts at well, it could start at either from the crown or it could start from the root, but it's 7 elements that are in your body. So I'll start from crown, then we have third eye, then we have throat, then we have heart, then we have solar plexus, then sacral, and then root. So those are the 7. And we have mapped each of the character strengths, each of those 24, to one of the chakra. And to really look at where you're in balance and where you're out of balance, and how your leadership can show up as optimal, and you're demonstrating all of your wonderful strengths. And when you overuse or underuse any of your character strengths, how that can show up in your body.
Interesting. For our audience, I always love our guests like you to give a little action item on what they can do starting now, to move forward.
Sure. So I know you encourage your listeners to take the VIA Character Strengths Survey. I would encourage you listeners to do that. And if you're interested in how to see where your strengths map to your body and the chakras, you can take the ROOTSilience leadership map, which is on our website, and you'll probably put the link in the show notes.
Yes.
But you can find it at ROOTSilience.com, www.ROOTSilience.com.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, so we have our marching orders, guys, and it'll be so interesting to see how they are all mapped out with the different chakras, so that we know where we need to pay a little more attention to, and then those that might be overused, then how to restore those areas that we overuse.
Exactly.
So this is the part of the show. This is the fun. Well, it's all fun. Don't get me wrong. But this is the part where I love to talk about 80s trends. So if we were in your closet in the 80s, what would you be donning? Like, what would be there? What would be your favorite?
Well, it would, because I've talked about chakras a little bit here, and I talked about crown to root, I'm going to go with headbands for my crown and leg warmers for my legs, for my root.
Fully covered, nothing in between.
I think, and I would be wearing something very colorful in between.
Exactly.
Because 80s. And by the way, I'm still pretty colorful, like on a day-to-day. So, rocking all the rainbow.
Rocking all the rainbow. And that's what, and I love that. And I feel that is something very current too. I love all the colors that are out there right now. And it's so fun. How do we get a hold of you to know more about what you do? And
sure.
So we can get in touch with you.
My coaching website is essential-wholeness.com, www.essential-wholeness.com. And the leadership work that I have developed is ROOTSilience, and that's www.ROOTSilience.com.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again for being with us today. It really was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. It was lovely. Absolutely fabulous. Thanks.
And until next time.